Greetings, mind crafters, and welcome to another Mindcraft discussion out here at the Notch. I am with Dr. Elizabeth Allen-Pennebaker. Okay, and as you know, I'm your host with the most, Dr. Kimberly Quinn, here on this glorious day. Is it okay if I call you Elizabeth?
Yes.
All right, excellent. And so I cannot tell you how elated I am to have Elizabeth with us here on this glorious day, because Elizabeth has chosen to speak about bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
So I just let you take it away. How about so it's like equal playing field. Not everybody might know what that is.
Sure.
Right? So maybe you can start by explaining what it is and what it isn't.
Okay. Yeah. So bipolar disorder is it's sort of like depression with a flip side. Right. So if you have depression, you sort of feel low, you feel oftentimes you have low self-esteem with it. You feel like life really isn't going to go anywhere. You feel very tired all the time. And sort of like just dragging to get out of bed. And if you can imagine the flip side of that, that is one of the components of bipolar disorder. So bipolar disorder includes depression, but it also includes a flip side, which is known as mania, or depending on the type of bipolar that you have, hypomania. And with mania or hypomania, you feel fantastic. You feel like you have tons of energy. You need very, very little sleep. You feel like you can kind of do anything. You get super duper goal directed. And that all sounds really great until it kind of takes an ugly turn, and then you become extremely irritable. If you're totally distractible, you can't pay attention to anything, and you basically kind of unravel. And if you have more extreme component of mania or more extreme form of mania, you can do really dangerous things like drive too fast or engage in sexual relationships that aren't safe. You can basically drain your bank account. You know, there are stories of people buying, like 10 air fryers or 12 round the world tickets when they're in extreme forms of mania. So it seems like it would be great, except that it really isn't. It's actually tremendously maladaptive. So,
And that's, of course, there are also some stereotypes out there too, right? So that gave me a really good visual. Yep. Just sort of reckless behavior, like a runaway train. I got that.
Runaway train. Well, it starts out feeling like you're in love, like
new
love, right?
Right.
And then it goes into something much uglier.
Much uglier.
Yeah.
Because now is that Elizabeth, why some people don't want to take medication because they're like way up and they're loving it, right?
Yes, and one of the problems with many of the forms of bipolar medication, particularly lithium, is that it'll take you down from the highs, but it really won't fix the depressive side of things. And so it's kind of like they took the only fun part of it out. And so not surprisingly, like rational people might be like, well, why would I do that, right?
Right.
But of course you need to, because it's really dangerous when you let mania go unchecked. And of course, depression, of course, is also deeply, deeply dangerous. People with bipolar disorder have a 25 to 30% greater chance of death by suicide.
I read that.
Yeah, so it's like not a joke at all, this disease.
No, I read that, just super high at risk.
Yeah.
And also, what's the deal? Speaking of the suicide thing,
Yeah.
I know there's a higher correlation with substance use too.
I would imagine, yes, there is.
So
I don't know. There's theories about why that is. My guess is that people are medicating, self-medicating
right,
with
absolutely.
it. Absolutely.
Just like anything else, right?
Yes, and I'm just lucky that I kind of never got tempted that way.
Right.
But it's just luck. Yeah,
Okay.
I think for me.
And now, Elizabeth, you and I were talking in the Jeep about there being two types.
Yes.
And then I said to you, because I was really enlightened on the way here to the woods, because I have all the textbook knowledge of the graduate school stuff.
Yep.
Not the same.
Nope.
As living with it. Might
Nope.
be a teeny bit of overlap, but not exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
So the two types, why don't you explain those to us, for, like the real skinny?
Yeah, okay. So to start with, I'll say that there are two types, bipolar 1, bipolar 2. I have bipolar 2. Bipolar 1 tends to be more extreme, right? Those are the sort of the really dangerous sides of mania come out in bipolar 1. So they have what is called full-blown mania. A lot of people refer to it as full-blown mania. And that's when you can end up with serious delusions of grandeur. You can do really, really foolish things like emptying your bank account or, sort of leaving your partner and just going somewhere and, because you think it would be great. You can make some really bad decisions that can have very long-term impacts for you personally or at work or, education-wise. That form of bipolar disorder tends to be much more extreme and much more dangerous, but you're symptomatic much less often, right? So less than half the time is when you would have symptoms, right? More than half the time you would tend to be in remission, right? You wouldn't say you're really symptom-free because there's usually you can kind of feel something or other. At least I do when I'm asymptomatic. I still feel something or other, but you'll be quite functional. And so it's kind of like I say, you kind of take your bipolar in different forms, right? If you're bipolar 1, you take it like more intensely, but for less time. Bipolar 2, you have symptoms about 55% of the time. Most of the time, that's depressive symptoms, right? With bipolar 1, actually, you can be manic and never actually go down into depression at all. Some people have it that way. With bipolar 2, there's always a depressive component. And then the other sort of, you have symptoms about 55% of the time. Most of that is depressive, and then the other part of that is when you're in something called hypomania, which is like mania, except that it's usually less intense and or shorter, right? The DSM criteria difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 is that for bipolar 1, the manic episodes last 7 days. For bipolar 2, they only last 4. Right, and that would be one of the ways you distinguish it. In my experience, my manic episodes tend to be less extreme, which is good because they're hard to deal with even as they are. Doesn't mean I haven't made lots of stupid decisions. I have, like things that are really out of character, and that's one of the challenges with the disease is that you do things that are out of character, and then people they kind of, if they don't understand, they kind of judge you, and they think that you have a bad character when you don't. But those episodes are a lot shorter for me. And so I end up with a lot more depression, which, again, like I'm more controlled, I get to be more level, but I do feel kind of worse, I think, for more of the time. So that's the fundamental difference between them. I actually, even though I'm symptomatic for more of the time, I would definitely say that I prefer having bipolar 2 than the alternative, simply because the medications for bipolar 2 are a lot less difficult in terms of their side effect profile.
Right. And you know what, Elizabeth, you have me thinking too, just being, a fast minder with the ADHD. I know that when I've had, because I've got our youngest is also in the club. So we call it volcanoing in the house. And I know that even though I have a grip most of the time, like you're saying, when you have that, it's for me, and outing ourselves, we're talking about that. Yeah. And again, it's not an excuse, it's an explanation, but it helps people to really get it. I know for me, the hardest thing throughout my entire life is not so much it's when you have that, like you say, people judging your character for something you couldn't help. And it's once you come back into your sort of regular mindset, it's that shame feeling.
Oh, it's awful.
It's excruciating. It's excruciating because you can't get out of your skin. You can't, and I can't believe I said that.
Yes.
And I think I felt you there.
Yeah.
Because that's a similar thing with the impulsivity that goes on that I've struggled with my entire life. Yeah. And that shame thing. It's not even the ADHD, it's the shame.
Yes.
That takes you down.
The shame is so much worse than anything else. And
that being defective, flawed, what's the matter with me?
Yeah, or just, for whatever it is that you did, right? That's terrible.
Or said or didn't do.
Didn't do. And I always say to myself, I think the cruelest part of bipolar disorder actually is not how you feel, sort of when you're depressed, or not how you feel when you're manic, but what do you do when you've done something terrible? Because either you have to just own it and apologize for it, and the best way to apologize for it is not to give any kind of excuse or rationale or anything, right? That's the most
just own it.
Authentic apology, but then people are kind of left thinking that you have this capacity to do something terrible, and they don't understand why you did it, and so they think that you're kind of a bad person when really you're just a person who's got brain wiring problems.
Brain wiring differences, right? You know, that we're constantly working at. You know, I know at Fabulous 58, I'd like to say I have it under control most of the time.
Yeah.
Hence, or not hence, but emphasis on not all of the time.
Not all of the time.
Just like a 2-year-old, if we're hungry, angry, sick, or tired, expect that filter to not be there as much. You know, I mean, it's just and also excited.
Yeah.
I'm super excited. I'm like a gerbil on crack. I can't even contain myself. You know? Totally get it.
I think the difference is with bipolar disorder is that it'll be more of a trajectory, right?
Yeah.
I think for you, you're always kind of battling back, you know, sort of impulsivity. For me, there are times when that's not hard at all. And then for me, like, I'll sort of get myself, catch myself going up into mania. And then I'm like, okay, now I've got to be super careful.
Right.
I don't know. If
Yeah. Totally. Because they're different. But I get the, you know, the impulsive thing. And it's often when I'm just plain freaking excited.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be negative. It's like sometimes I walk into campus, I want to do this, that, and I have so much to share with them today. I'm like, and then that's when I pull myself into the breathing and the mindfulness thing. And so that's actually probably a good transition, because I know you have done a really good job with managing this wiring difference with, I think acupuncture is one. I know mindfulness, we talked about that, breathing.
Actually, I don't do mindfulness.
Okay, all right.
No, I don't. And part of it is that I struggle with rumination.
Oh, okay.
And so going inwards is not
doesn't work for you.
The best thing for me.
All
right. And for some people, I think it would work really well.
Right.
But I just find that it doesn't. It just kind of like amplifies negative stuff for me a lot. So I tend to be much more like exercise focused, nutrition focused.
Totally.
Right. That's where I kind of do my biggest interventions. Yeah.
The exercise thing, it works for anyone, whether you're neurodivergent or
it does
neurotypical, if there is such a thing. We talked about that. But I know I will drive everyone insane in my life if I'm not running.
Yes.
And hiking and walking and moving.
Yes. And actually, I found that if I don't actually break a sweat, it doesn't do anything for me, which is really weird. Like, I think it has to be, there's a moment when the switch clicks, right?
Yeah.
Like about mile 2 or 3.
You said that. Yeah.
Right? And all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay. Like,
now
brain is in a different place.
I was just saying that to my husband, Tommy. He's like, if this isn't enough, we did whatever. It was like, this isn't enough for me. Like, I need to.
No, you got to do more.
I didn't hit it. Like, I didn't hit it yet.
I know.
You know what I mean? Like, I got to run more so I sweat.
Yes.
And I feel like even like an ounce of tired, maybe not even tired, but I don't know, like you did something. You
got to do something. It's it's hard to describe it. I feel like
a slow walk is good for you, but it's not enough for me.
It doesn't do a thing for me. I mean, it's lovely.
And it's lovely. It's like contemplative.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
It doesn't do a reset for me.
No,
I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. You know what's fascinating is I have this doctor who's just amazing, wonderful naturopath. She actually had me do 23andMe, downloaded the raw data and looked at it to help me understand what goes on for me. And the first thing she said to me was, you need to sweat every day. You should be doing saunas. I was like, how about a 5-mile run or 6-mile run? And she said, yeah, that'll do it too. Like that was, she looked at that, the genetic data and looked at my methylation patterns and like the epigenetic changes and said, that's what you need to do.
God, that's awesome.
I know. So
I remember
you're the same. Yeah.
I remember my lovely grandmother, who was my everything. I love you, Graham, if you're listening. I remember way back when.
Yeah.
She said, ladies don't sweat. so we glow or we do something else.
Yeah.
But I need to glow.
Yes.
Every day.
Yes.
Copiously. Yeah. So I have pit stains and everything. So Elizabeth, you were also saying something about, I think, acupuncture.
I do.
Tell me about that. I'm like needle phobic, so I can't wait to hear it.
Okay, yeah. So I'll preface this by saying that I also take medication, and 150% with bipolar disorder, you need to take medication. It just is not the kind of condition that you can manage holistically. Right. Only holistically. Right. You have to hit it from all sides. Right. So that's the number one thing that I do is I am absolutely religious about taking my medication. But then I got to this point where I kind of went to the doctor when I was first diagnosed. And actually, one thing that's interesting, I think, for people to know about bipolar disorder, particularly bipolar 2 disorder, is that especially if it starts quite early, which for me it did, like I was showing signs at around 12, 13.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was one of the early onset people. that it can look like depression for a long time. Because what will happen is you'll get sort of depressed, and then you might come back and you'll be slightly manic, but people will just perceive it as normal or healthy, or look how happy she
she's
is
better
suddenly.
now.
Yeah, right? And so I didn't start to show like true manias until, oh gosh, my late 20s. I remember at some point saying to somebody, I feel like I've had 10 cups of coffee and I haven't had any. Right. And that was the first moment when I was like, wow, I'm really manic. I'm like, and I didn't know the word for it. I didn't know what it was. It just was feeling strange. And I started to like do things that were dangerous and unsafe and not that smart. And you know, and I was just like, God, I'm just kind of like irresponsible, I guess. Right. But so it didn't show up until then. Right. But I remember like when I got diagnosed, which was not until my early 30s. I went to the doctor and I said, okay, well, so now I feel like, you know, these things, they're like this now, but it's still not that nice to be like this now.
Right.
And actually I'm making a misleading hand gesture because it's not necessarily a sine wave. Right.
Not like a lasagna noodle.
Yeah,
right?
no, you can kind of go for a while and then be like,
right.
right? Like it can, and you don't, you know, sometimes you'll come up and then you'll just
we're all different.
Level out, right? Yeah, well, we're all different, and bipolar is not a sine wave. A lot of people think it is, like what, you know, goes up, it goes down, and for me, I experienced it that way, but not everybody does. But I remember saying, okay, so like now it's like this, and it's still not that pleasant, and he started to say, well, how about another drug? And I was like, oh God, I don't want to go there, right? Like, because once you get into drug cocktails and the side effects, they like amplify each other, cancel each other out, and then you're on another drug for the side effects, and I was like, let me try something else first. So I went to acupuncture, and I love acupuncture. Like I walked in the first time and I was really a little bug-eyed from just being kind of up, and I walked out, I was like, I'm the Buddha. Right? Like, it was amazing.
That's awesome.
And I find it to be so helpful in terms of just dealing with immediate stuff. Like if I walk in and I'm feeling a little low or I'm feeling a little high, like that can really level that out. But then also over time, bipolar is one of those things where the more stable you are, the more stable you are.
Yeah, I think I got that.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, and actually one of the kind things, like, you know, there's not that much fun, that many things that are fun about aging, but actually one of the kind things about bipolar is that as you get older, you usually get better.
You mellow out.
Yeah, which
kinda.
is just, what a relief.
It mellows out.
It mellows out.
Sadly, that's the opposite with the fast minders.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Thomas Brown's like a leading expert. I don't know if you've heard of him or not, but I had the good pleasure of meeting him at a conference, and basically we talked for like 20 minutes, and I was in beginning menopause then, and he's like, so here's the good news. All the strategies that you had, you're going to have to amp them up. Oh,
Great.
God, that's good to know.
Yeah, it's
that
good.
if you,
information is power.
Yeah, because midlife is such a great time.
I love
Personally,
it.
I love it.
I'm digging it.
At least for women, I mean, it's so good. Cool. So the acupuncture.
Yeah, and actually I will say one other thing about acupuncture too that I loved, right, is when I was first diagnosed, I really struggled with the idea like, oh my God, I have a disease. I have a disease that I'm going to have forever, and I'm kind of like messed up. There's something wrong with me, right? Like I really kind of struggled with that label. Yeah. Even though in some ways also I was tremendously relieved because I was like, well, at least I'm not like a flawed human being with just a lousy character who does really reprehensible things, right? Like at least I knew what it was, right? But I also just felt very marred, spoiled, messed up, right? And acupuncture is not like that, right? Acupuncture, you have a liver imbalance, and everybody's got an imbalance in something. Right? And for me, it's a liver imbalance. Like it'll be different for other people, what they say, but it's totally non-judgmental because it's just an imbalance, which can be corrected.
It's just an imbalance.
Right? And it's marvelous change from the pathology. And I found that tremendously like healing and liberating to start to think about it that way.
God, I love that, Elizabeth. And you just set me to a squirrel, which is ironic because we're out here with all of them. But you're saying about they also live in my head every day. But it's also, you said about the non-judgmental part. Yeah. That's how I feel about this.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I will literally come out in the morning. Usually it's just my everyday. I need to be in nature, or I will drive myself and everyone else insane. And nature doesn't judge me.
No.
Nature doesn't care how tall you are, small you are, thin, fat, how neurodivergent you are. It doesn't care. It's just like, you're back.
Doesn't care what you did yesterday.
It doesn't care what you did yesterday. No. It's just so good to see you. And there are days, this actually happened to me, because it's pretty under control, but every once in a while I just say I have an ADHD day, and nothing's going to change it. Like, just let me do my thing. And I said to myself, thankfully it was a Sunday at work, I came to the woods. I think I said this on a different video. I'm not going home until I'm feeling like the Buddha. Yeah. And I was out here for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
because it's
what it takes.
just immersed in
Yes.
not judging. You're not saying anything. You're not shooting your mouth off,
Yeah.
or you are, but no one can hear you, so it doesn't
Right.
make a difference.
Yeah.
And I love the non-judgment piece. And for me, like you with acupuncture, there's something enormously healing
Yes.
about that.
Yes.
You're okay exactly as you are.
Yes.
It's like an anti-shame campaign.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Gone.
Yes.
It's like, bleh.
Yes.
You know, I love
It's all
that.
gone. And the other thing that I'll say about nature too is that they're starting to figure out, there's a whole lot of things that they're starting to learn about bipolar disorder, but one of the things that they're starting to realize is that part of why sleeping is so problematic for bipolar
Right.
disorder, because that's one of the things that's really hardest, like a
Oh, totally.
few days of no sleep will precipitate a manic episode in me, like
Yeah,
without
yeah.
question. They're starting to figure out that it's a disorder of the circadian clock, and one of the best things about being out in nature is that you reset it according to the sun, and it
Nice.
keeps you nice and level. And there's actually a whole form of therapy about keeping a really regular schedule, and I find nature is really important.
I need it like I breathe oxygen.
Yeah.
I'm out here every single day with Giovanni,
Yeah.
unless it's monsooning.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
I mean, if it's even drizzling,
Yeah.
it's snowing, it's below zero.
Yeah.
He doesn't come if it's below zero, but I come if it's below
Yeah.
zero. You just go pause, get frozen. But I'm out here, literally, it takes a lot for me not
Yeah.
to come out here because it's the best medicine. And like you were saying, it doesn't mean we're not doing all of it. Like we
You're
need to
doing all of
know. I took Adderall for a really long time. I couldn't believe people could focus like that. It was such a, I was like, hallelujah. I was like
know.
47. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yes.
I could like clean a closet.
Yes.
I could grade papers at length
Yes.
without taking 95 breaks.
Yes.
And the only reason I got off of it is because I ended up getting a little bit of heart palpitations, not because of that, because of the second vaccine from the Rona. Just for me, I'm not an
Oh,
anti-vaxxer,
interesting.
just
Yeah,
for
yeah,
me.
yeah.
And it was the second one, which went away, so they know it was that. So I might revisit it because it really, whoever's listening, it really emphasized on really worked for me.
Yeah.
I had nothing bad to say about Adderall, nothing. It was a focusing agent.
Yes.
I could get shit done.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Easily.
I found meds to be transformative also, right? They kind of get a bad rap, but like when you get the right one, you get the right one.
It's right.
So
You can't,
good.
it's not. It's just a personal what works for you thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not anti-meds, and I'm not pro-medicate everybody.
No.
You know, you have to figure out what works for you, right?
Right. With bipolar, I think that it's you should start with the presumption that you'll probably be medicated with something because it's not safe not
It's
to
not
be.
safe not to be, which is
Right.
different than some other things.
Different than many other things.
Many other
right? Like
things.
with many other mental health conditions,
Right,
I would
right.
start with lifestyle stuff, but not with
But
this
it's
one.
I'm so glad you're saying that because
Yeah.
it validates with all the med shame out there.
I know.
I
Don't
had
have
a
med shame.
doctor say something horribly scathing to me when I was
Oh.
50. You're not on time today, even with the medication. You can't get it right. Can you imagine that?
Oh my God! I hope you popped him one.
I wrote
her.
a letter to her that was very, very well written,
Yeah.
and signed it Dr. Kimberly Quinn, like the whole shame thing.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
told her that she reminded me of my abusive alcoholic father,
Yeah.
is what I said,
Oh my
actually,
God.
before I left.
So
But I did not send it to the medical board because but I didn't say I didn't.
Right.
And so she didn't know that. And I
Right.
figured this would just get the point across.
Shot across the bow.
That wasn't, because I'm not going to ruin somebody's career. I'm just
Right.
getting the point that I left revisiting a place when I was, 8
Yeah.
that didn't feel good. So
Yeah.
don't do that again.
No. I remember one of the first times very early in my diagnosis, I went to see a doctor and it was like a public health clinic, and I only had a 15-minute appointment, and I drove an hour to get there because this person had been recommended to me. I arrived 5 minutes late. They wouldn't let me in. And they said, well, you failed your appointment.
How do you do that?
And I was like, I don't know how you do that. But they wouldn't give me like a refill on the prescription.
Oh,
and with
no.
the bipolar med I'm on, like it's an anti-seizure thing.
Right.
And so if you go off it, you have seizures, right? So I'm like, I need it. Like you can't just stop me
see,
on
that's
this,
just-
right? And I remember thinking, if I yell at them, I'm just a crazy bipolar person, and if I don't yell at them, then I'm admitting that I somehow failed a doctor's appointment, and then I'm just an irresponsible crazy
There's like
person.
nowhere to go with it.
And I hung up the phone and I just burst
There's
into
no way to go with
tears.
it. Yeah.
It's so shame. That shame stuff is disgusting that they do.
No,
Yeah.
it is disgusting. And
That's one of the reasons I'm out. I want people to know.
I am so Elizabeth and I talked about this in the Jeep, because I came out, I don't know, it was halfway through, maybe a third of the way through my Champlain career. And thankfully it was a wonderful wraparound, because we've all had negative, like if you get too talkative, a colleague, not at Champlain's or somewhere else, you just knew it was you because they closed the door and they heard you coming. Like, there's all kinds of stuff. And I agree with Elizabeth, like 200%, that to out ourselves, and we're not saying as an excuse, but as an explanation, it makes it easier on everybody.
Right.
People in general are good.
Yes.
So if they know, like, oh, that makes sense. What can I do for you?
Right. Or sometimes they'll be like, yo, you are talking super fast. Are you okay?
Are you okay?
Right. And that is so helpful.
It is. And also, when they can not only be, because I have like tolerance is here, acceptance is here, and embrace is here. Yeah. And I have had so many embracing moments at Champlain where I was actually given projects that involved a lot of creativity, because that's a gift we have too. And I'm just like, oh, so healing. Yeah. You know, with all the negative shit. Right. Yeah. You know, you'll never read. You never go to college. I know. Double bird. Right. Right, kind of thing. Yeah. Like, you know, and, you know, you're a disappointment. You know what I want to say right now? I would say, that's doctor disappointment to you. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm so pro. Like, that's right? High five. I'm so pro out, you know, and just be ready with safe people. Yeah. And if you get, you know, if we're kind, we'll say a non-safe person. I've had a lot of words for that off film. Yep. Then you just take the high road and, look, they're not like Elizabeth or Kim Worthy if they're talking like that. I mean, didn't make the cut. No. So just dismissed, you know what I mean? So the last thing I would say, I think it's a good place to sign off here. I just want to make sure we hit the accommodations, because I did not know this as a professional person. Obviously with students I knew this. Yeah. I didn't know that was a thing. Oh yeah. And when you said that to me, I'm like, oh my God, I can do this? Yes. Do you want to just say that for everybody? Yeah. So the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, if you have a mental health condition, it is your best friend. Because many, many mental health conditions in the DSM are covered under it. Right. And what that means is that if you're smart, you can sort of think down the line and be like, okay, like what am I going to need to just stay level and steady, right? And with bipolar, you're really thinking about level, right? And with other conditions, you're thinking about it in slightly different ways. But you can be really strategic about asking in advance for the things that you know that you need. So the accommodation that I had when I was working at Champlain was that I didn't teach 8 a.m. classes. And the reason for that was based on your rhythm. Was based on my rhythm, right? And in Vermont, in the winter, you won't get daylight until around, 7:30, 8 a.m. And I would go out every day and run or ski or something and reset my body clock with that. And it's extremely important for me to do that. And so I got the accommodation to do that. That was my one accommodation. And the rule for accommodations is that you have to be able to perform the basic functions of the job in such a way that it doesn't sort of, cause unreasonable hardship for an employer. And it was not an unreasonable hardship for Champlain to schedule me for classes that weren't 8 a.m. classes. I was still able to teach my full 4/4 load and do all the things. And so it was, I don't think 8 a.m.s are popular for students either, I'm just saying. No, right? I mean, they should just be outlawed, period, right? I'm just saying, they should start that stuff at 10. I know, it'd be so much better for so many people. But anyway, so that's an example of the kind of accommodation that I had. And the way that you do that is you kind of just reach out to the HR department or the people center if it's at Champlain, and you say, this is my medical condition. This is the accommodation that I want. You may have to get it documented. I had to get it documented because especially with things that are invisible, right? Then, they want proof. And that's reasonable enough. So I had my prescribing psych give me a full letter about what was going on and why the accommodation was useful and necessary. And then we had a conversation about, did that make sense? Dean weighed in and said, yeah, we can work with that.
And then I had the accommodation.
That's
And it's in
awesome.
my
That is-
file, and I had it. And it makes me a little crazy because I have actually heard people say this, right? That students have come to me in the past and said, one of my professors said we won't get accommodations in the workplace, so we should start not using them now when we're
no.
students. And I just want to put it out there, like, that could not be
No.
further from the truth, right? You are covered under the ADA for your whole life. Right, as long as you have one of the conditions that is covered in it, and there are many that are covered in it. So use college instead as a way to practice.
I think that's better.
Right. And if you're teaching a student, help them practice
Yes.
that. They will need it for their whole life, especially if they have a really serious condition. Help them practice. Don't tell them they shouldn't use it, because there's already enough shame about accommodations. Right. And just so help them learn to be good users of the accommodations.
Totally. I'm in such an anti-shame campaign with the whole thing.
Yes.
Because underneath all that wiring, I mean, would we choose to like say the things like, and it makes it's so ridiculous. So this empathy is super healing.
Yes. You know, actually, one of the things that I say, like, would I choose to have bipolar disorder? No, basically no. But I do feel like it has given me the gift of much more empathy, because
100%.
I recognize, like, okay, well, you know, I'm walking around doing stuff I don't always want to do. I'm sometimes having a hard battle, like somebody else is too.
100%. I wouldn't change anything about my whole life even.
Yeah.
Because all that, if you want to call it adversity or whatever, I mean, life, it's just life, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't change it either.
No.
Plus, I like myself the way I am.
Yeah.
Quirks, fast mind.
Yeah.
Squirrel chaser, shiny object chaser. You know.
Yeah. I wonder if I would feel that way if I didn't have access to really good drugs and really good treatment, right? Because it's pretty painful when bipolar is fully symptomatic.
Right.
But the process that I've had to go through to get it under control with the tools that I have available to me have made it, I think,
better.
a positive rather than
100%.
than negative experience.
Yeah, I want to make sure too, Elizabeth, if everybody's listening, that I don't, because I definitely like and love myself the way I am, and it's a big old mix, right?
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure I don't diminish lots of pain, moments,
Yes.
not so good decision making,
Yes.
and that had consequences,
Yes.
and so I just want to make sure
Yeah.
the honesty's out there on the
Yeah.
table. I wouldn't change it, and I've grown like miles and miles and miles and miles. It's just that I wouldn't undo it, because you're right. The depth and the, I love it when I get the fast minders.
Yeah.
I mean, I love all of them. I don't mean
Yeah.
that, but it's like I get you. And since I've outed myself, I didn't used to. Now they've all seen the TED Talk and stuff. And I'm like, oh God. So when one of them gets up and says, "I'm in the Fast Mind Club, Professor." Okay, good.
Yeah.
You've seen those.
Yeah.
I think it's better for everybody.
Oh, much better. I once had
feels good.
I once had a student burst into tears in my office because I said to him, I have depression and bipolar disorder. I know how this feels. And I said, I want you to know this is not your fault.
Love it. Love it.
This big, burly dude just melted
I'm sure.
into tears because nobody had ever said that to him before.
Oh my God. I love those words.
Yeah.
It's not your fault.
Yeah.
It's not your fault.
Yeah.
That's an anti-shame campaign thing. And the other thing I say to mine a lot when I truly mean it, in addition to it's not your fault, is I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just get the tears.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and another one is, I said, well, clearly you're intelligent. You know the tears I've gotten over that?
Yeah.
Like, I've never heard that from anybody before. Because especially when they've got a wiring difference.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you're super smart.
Yeah. Or you're brave to be here at all.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
Like, and they go, no, I'm always scared of everything because I'm so anxious. No. I'm like, you're brave because you're game when you're scared.
Oh my God. In fact, I'll just tell you, then we can sign off. I went to, I had a student this semester who ended up with a he just shared this with me, ended up with a 3.8 or 9 or something.
Damn.
Like Summa or magna cum lately, right?
Wow.
And he's I think a first year.
Nice.
And I said, wow. And he wasn't one of my students, but actually not one of mine, but involved with something else I was doing. And I said, wow, I'm not surprised how intelligent you are. And he was just like looked around. He said, I never even made honors anywhere else. Like and he had that stuff said to him, and and he had just grown, and he'd clearly, the Champlain's a good fit for him.
Yeah.
He had a ton to say about his professors wrapping around him and stuff. So,
Nice.
just amazing. So, all right, lots of good notes to end on here. So, Elizabeth, Dr. Elizabeth Allen-Pennebaker, it has been a pleasure having you out here in my happy place. to film you talking about bipolar and made it so wonderfully clear with your openness and your vulnerability. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for letting me come. I'm kind of a fangirl of all your nature walks on the episodes. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to go where she films. Yay!
You're the first one. So way to go.
Nice.
All right.